Hello, everybody. I'm late. Better late than never. And
Better late than never.
that dude again. Dang. He interrupts me a lot when I'm trying to do my show. But that tells me we're good to go. We're out there going. And we're going. So, it's Thursday night again, people. I know. You couldn't wait. It's not good to wish your life away. But let's try to remember that the quicker Thursday comes, the quicker I get to sleep late. Let's just remember that for me, okay? I know. I know it's hard to think of others before yourself, but do that for me, okay? Think about me Thursdays. Thursday comes quick. You get to see the show. I get to sleep late. I get to try to sleep late. So there you go. But Thursday night, Minutes with Milo, talk about screws. Why screws? Because I deal a lot with them every day. You deal projects, you deal with little repairs, odds and ends, fix a coffee table, fix a door, fix a car, fix an old camper, fixing stuff. More than likely, 99% of the time, there's some type of screw involved. Why? Because screws are good. Screws, we'll look at the definition. Garthok, there you are. Hey, I just barely beat you in here tonight. That's all I'm saying. You're fashionably late, and I was just late. So, we'll look at the definition of screws. But basically, it holds one thing to other things. You know, if it's short, it might hold one thing to another thing. If it's a long one, it might hold one thing to two things, or three things, or four things, or bunches of things. You just never know. Or it might attach something to one thing that holds lots of other things. So they're very, very useful. And the thing I like about them typically is you put them in. Oh, I didn't mean to do that right now. You take them out. Screwed. Story of my life. I know. Everywhere you go, you get some, you take some out, you lose some, but there's always more. So that's why I'm going to talk about screws. And I think I'm going to try to limit it myself to just what I know about. That's probably wood screws, sheetrock screws, and sheet metal screws. So we're not going to talk about bolts too much, but we will look at the difference between a screw and a bolt. But we're not going to talk about bolts too much because, yes, they're useful. They're really useful, but not to me as useful as screws. Okay, so if you have the right screw, you could probably get rid of some of your bolts. Maybe, you know. But power drills, ugga-duggas, as I call them, those are your impact guns. Impact guns. Those are very useful. Drills, yeah, for a couple of reasons. And the old faithful hand screwdriver, big useful. I'll tell you from experience, sometimes the old hand screwdriver is 10 times better than any power drill or ugga-dugga impact drill on getting screws in or out. And I think it has a lot to do with finesse. Finesse is a big thing, especially if you've had a screw. It's a long screw, it's holding a couple pieces of wood together, and it's been in there 30 years. You can't just jump on that thing with an impact gun and go bzzz. They look like they do really good, just bzzz, and have that thing come out. typically it's not going to happen. You're going to, what did they call it? I was reading it. You're going to get cammed or cammed it out. Basically, you're going to strip the head out, and you're never going to get the screw out until you dig it. Then get a pair of pliers onto it and start twisting it. Get it out enough to where then you can really get a good grip on it and twist it out there with a pair of pliers. But we're going to look at the different types of screws a little bit, mostly just like wood and sheet metal screws, and maybe some concrete screws. Now, Garthok brings up one of my, I just didn't realize this. I don't know exactly what he's talking about. I know there's two terms that I see a lot: self-drilling and self-tapping. All right, so we'll look at that, and they're not the same. And I think I had them reversed in my mind because at work we do a lot of putting up weather stripping, and it's what we use is a lot of foam, squishy foam pieces attached to an aluminum strip that slides into a groove, and then you drill the aluminum strip into the door frame. I did a lot with metal door frames, so we use a lot of, I used to call them self-tapping screws, but I think in reality I've been using self-drilling screws, and we'll look at that. All right, and wood screws, I'll use whatever is long enough, and it's not necessarily the best. But when you have something you got to get done, and you have the right length of screw, and you got plenty of them, you're going to throw them in there. One of the things I was reading as I was doing a little research was that you can use a self-drilling screw in wood. It said multi-material, which I don't find correct. And if I'm looking at this right, it just doesn't work. I think it makes the hole in the wood too big. You put it in there, and then the threads don't get a good bite, and it comes out real easy. All right. All right, so self-drilling screws has a bit on the end. Now, don't jump ahead. Follow along, but don't jump ahead. They are, see, that's the reason I would call them self-tapping. But they're not. They are self-drilling because they do have a special head on the end that you just start with nothing at all. And I would recommend, if you can, a little punch, but it's not necessary. As long as you have this is one of my worst traits, getting the impact or drill level this way and this way so that you're hitting it straight on and you're not down at an angle, because then it'll walk down or walk up or walk left. Or you chase it around all the time. But a little tap. I like spring-loaded punches. There we go. Spring-loaded punch. You push, 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 and then the spring goes, and it makes a little dot. And once it makes a little dot, buddy, you can get in there. All right. So you know the drill. We're going to share some screens with some of the things that I've looked up, read some definitions, look at some pictures, make fun of people. Oh, no. That's not every time, but sometimes. That's the bottom of that article. And it's kind of funny. That started out. All right. Let me get up. I've been bouncing around so much on this research that we're going to, I've got to kind of get them order in my head so I don't just blow your mind with a bunch of junk right off the bat. There's that. Okay. Let's bring that up. put me where'd I go? As always, I've got to shrink me down. Put me there. All right, we're going to start out with the definition from Wikipedia, of course, about what a screw is. And they call it screw mechanism. It's basically the same thing. No, it's not. Okay. Click that one. All right, screw. As a fastener, not as a mechanism, but screw as a fastener. A screw is an externally helical threaded fastener capable of being tightened or released by a twisting force, torque, to the head. The most common uses of screws are to hold objects together, and there are many forms for a variety of materials. Screws might be inserted into holes in an assembled part, or a screw may form its own thread. The difference between a screw and a bolt is that the latter, bolt, is designed to be tightened or released by torquing a nut. So, if you've used bolts, you know you don't necessarily have to torque the nut. You can torque the head of the bolt and it has the same effect. But, so, that is the definition. Most screws are tightened by a clockwise rotation, which is called right-hand thread, which 90% of stuff out there is, and there are left-handed threads. But I don't know if I've ever really noticed a screw. I've had bolts that were left-handed threads. But I don't think I've ever come across a screw that has a left-handed thread. Screws with left-handed threads are used in exceptional cases, such as where the screw will be subjected to counterclockwise torque, which would lead to loosening a right-hand screw. For this reason, the left-hand side of a bicycle has a left-hand thread. Yeah, but that's a bolt, not a screw. There's Robert. Hey, Robert. So, a screw and a bolt are, yes, the same in theory and a lot in practice. It's just the different types of, I guess in a bolt, there has to be an added dimension. A bolt has to have an opposite thread to go into. A screw can be inserted and put into something that has no other thread, and it makes a thread, and it can grab the material with not having a thread to go into. A bolt has to have a threaded something to go into. If you put a bolt and just twist it into wood, because it's such a fine thread, it'll never get a bite, and it'll pull right out. So, yes, if you had a threaded hole in metal, you could put a bolt into it, and it would act exactly like a screw. So, now bolts can have, so you wrote also a screw and a bolt. Bolts are driven from the outside of the head, where the screws are operated by a center drive. But, I mean, you can have bolts, that screws into a nut that has, they might be tapered like a screw head. They might have a Phillips head in them, might have a flat head in them. So, maybe we're splitting hairs on the bolt being a hex head at the top, or some type of, like you're saying, some type of head that then you grab it with a socket or a wrench or something and turn the outside, as opposed to using a screwdriver or a driver bit in a drill or a torque that goes in. But now, I looked at some bolts, and I can't remember the name of them right off. Where did that go? Ukraine. So we'll look at, see, here's a picture. I don't think you can see it very well because my picture's in the way. Let me move me around. So this first one here on the upper left, what happened to the Phillips head? Where did that go? Oh, you can't see the Phillips head. Let me scoot that over. Oh, get back over there. Where did it go? Which way did it go, George? There it is. All right. So starting at the top. Ah, why did it do that? Go back. Oh, geez, almighty Pete. Is this it down here? Okay. The upper left is a flathead screw. It's got a Phillips head in it. The Phillips head part. You can't see my pointer, can you? Yeah, you can. Ooh, there it is. Then there's your, this is a flange head. Oh my gosh, am I having troubles? I'm having bunches and bunches of troubles tonight. I can't grab the right frame. See what I did? See what I did there? Give me that. Oh, cancel. Oh my gosh. There. Here. Move that around. There we go. We're getting back onto it now. Good golly, Miss Molly. Oh, it did it to me again. Where are you? Where'd you go? This one. Let's try this for the 4th time. Now you can see. Flange head. So here was the bit that you were talking about before. William's here. Hello, William. We're talking about getting screws. Binding head. Now see, this one's got a flat head in it, but it is a thread like a bolt. Screw, bolt, thread, fine thread, machine thread, whatever you want to call it. There's another. So maybe I consider bolts a fine thread like a machine thread as opposed to a coarse thread, and I consider these more screws than bolts. But you're right, they have the same pretty much function, except these create their own thread while they're going into the material. These fine threads have to have some type of nut or opposite thread to screw into. So they need the female part where the other one makes its own female part. So I associate, yes, machine screws as being, call it a bolt. But technically, I guess a bolt would have a hex head on top where you use a wrench or a whatchadoodle to drive it in there. Socket. That's what I'm thinking of. Sockets. Okay. I had them all in order. Now they're all messed up. All right, so I started out, thinking that there's so many choices to do here. Oh, geez. That we ought to limit ourselves to a couple. And I think that's going to be the wood or the metal screw. Okay? So if you look at these two things, they look a lot alike. They really do. They look a lot alike. So this is a blog by Jose Henry, or maybe that's Josie Henry, May 4th, 2023. Wood screw versus metal screw, what are the differences? Okay, so he talks about the definition there a little bit. Screws are components that they use to hold stuff together, hold materials together. We'll try to get it so you can see the whole enchilada. Speaking of enchiladas, we went to eat today and my belly is still full. You might not be able to see all of it. Let's take it down 80%. Still can't see all of it. I don't know why I started to mess with this before I got on, got sidetracked, and now you're still not going to be able to see all of it. Screws are the components used to join two or more materials in a strong bond. There are so many useful types of screws, but mainly two particular screws can be categorized. One is a sheet metal screw and the other is a wood screw. These two types of screws come in different sizes, custom designed for specific purposes. Yes, the shrimp was good. Yeah, shrimp was great. The main difference between these two is clear in their identity. But it ain't clear to me. Wood screws are used in wood and metal screws are used in metal. Okay, Captain Obvious. The question is how they are different. Well, the answer is both screws are designed uniquely for their specific purposes. At first glance, they may look similar, but the difference is visible in their threads. To identify them correctly, you need to observe the thread level. Wood screws have a wider spaced, medium depth screw. Also, some long wood screws have threadless shank at the top position. Metal screws have always a tighter and sharp thread that covers the full screw length. Both the screws have a variety of heads, flat, oval, with Phillips, straight, or square drive slots to operate. So the article will guide you through the differences, pros and cons of the screws to use the identification process. With no delay, let's jump into the discussion. So these two pictures, just looking at his, thinking back to his description, they still look alike. Deturted. You want to take that mud stripe out, huh? You think if you ate shrimp with that in there, would it kill you, make you sick? What do you think? Now, we're getting a little off topic. But anyway, what do you think? Would it make you sick? Garth says, yes, sir. So if you're out there on a shrimp boat and you get hungry, you couldn't just pull you up a shrimp and crack it in half and then eat the tail. You have to get the little mud stripe out. Always. I wouldn't want to try it. I'd definitely be looking to get that out. But one of the things he talked about in the description is, see, this wood screw has the thread stop, up near the top, up near the neck. Then there's, some blank area, and then the head's tapered at the shoulder. This one, the thread does go all the way up to the flat part. This one has like a built-in washer deal, flat area, and then the hex and the flat. So those are distinctive to me. Well, I don't know, Robert, if they have a larger head. To me, the taper is so, we'll look at this too, is so that you can get it to go down in there and get it flush with the piece of board. Let's just say it's a board that you're drilling it into or screwing it into. You can get it flush with that material or flush with whatever you're holding onto the board. The sheet metal screw, you don't, unless you drill a bigger hole and then countersink it all the way down into the wood or metal, you'd never hide that head. The head's almost always protruding above, where you screw it in. But see, the problem a lot of times that I have, and William might attest to this, is if you don't pre-drill a hole for a wood screw and you're working with questionable wood, thin wood, you know, a wood screw can split it. And if it doesn't split it while it's going into it, when you jam the taper into it, a lot of time this acts like a wood splitting wedge. And as you screw it down into it to make it flush, like let's just say a picket on a porch, this part of it can just crack it wide open like a wedge splits a log open. And it is terribly frustrating that even though you may pre-drill a little hole so that the shank and the threads don't split the wood, the minute you try to sink or countersink this head a little bit, it splits it open like a log. And then I use that as an example. The spindle on your porch is wasted. Now it's got a nice big split in it. And it doesn't always happen with screws. And I'll tell you just a little example. Working on that old camper, you would have thought they were building a 2-story house. They used huge nails in some of those things. Well, they were using like a 2x1 or a 2x2 is what basically is the wood sizes they were using when they built this thing. Well, when they hammered some of those big, long, 2.5 inch nails in those things, it literally split the wood, and they just kept on getting it. I mean, they're building these things, I don't know, on a production line or how they're building them, they're building them by hand. And this one's in, a 62 model. So, they didn't go, oh man, I split that thing, I'm going to have to get another one. They just said, oh, well, that's going to be covered up by the roof, or that's going to be covered up by the siding, or they're never going to see that. Let's keep going. So, splitting small wood can be done with, the wrong nail, or maybe even the right nail used the wrong way, or a wood screw. So, let's see what he says. Wood screws. A wood screw is a piercing metal screw that comes with a kind of sharp thread. It is relatively a rough pitch that is used for the insertion in wood. Basically, the wood screw is as similar as the metal screw, but still they have some specific purposes of their own. Usually they drive into the wood material because they are manufactured focusing on fastening materials like plywood, lumber, and other types of wood. Wood screws have a very sharp point that can dig into the wood. This makes it highly useful in tightening wood materials. It's available in shorter threading, such as an inch, and with their length ranges from an inch to 3 inches. Usually 2/3 length is threaded and 1/3 is unthreaded. In wood screws, this allows connecting two pieces of wood with better security and minimal damage to the attached wood. These wood screws are widely used in outdoor building structures such as decks and fences. Wood screws are ideal to minimize the damage and prevent cracking. Buddy, that ain't the case. I mean, I don't know how many pickets, now we don't do a lot of porches, but how many pickets we've screwed together and it just split the stupid thing right down the middle like a log using specific deck screws, right? But not pre-drilling. And then sometimes you pre-drill them and the screw part goes in fine, and then when you pop the head down in there so it's flush with the surface of the wood, it still splits it. So, I don't know. Key features. 2/3 of the length are threaded. They're very sharp end, designed for flexibility, minimal damage to attaching wood, best for wood fastening. Okay, metal screw. Specifically, the sheet metal screw. A metal is sort of hardware supply that's designed to drive into the metal objects. Boy, that sentence does not make sense. A metal is a sort of hardware. Here, let me get you up here. So you read this right, this sentence. A metal is a sort of hardware supply that designs to drive into the metal objects. As an example, if you are planning to join sheet metal together, then the metal screw is the ideal choice for you. Metal screws are different in design, size, and function. They are made with the focus of fastening metal-based materials and also hard plastic. They are self-tapping screws. The main manufacturing purpose of them is to secure metal to metal, plastic, wood, fiberglass, or other materials. Metal screws are fully threaded to enhance the grip level and tighten the connecting pieces. So with that in mind, all right, he used the term self-tapping screw. So let me go, this was just a search I did to get rid of that because I got junk floating around everywhere. That was what I talked about. So here's a little picture. This is a machine thread. This is a sheet metal screw, and then a cap screw also has the same threads on it. But here's the little bit that you look at that Garthok was talking about that drills the hole into the metal as you go. Where are the most common screws for woodwork? I was trying to find that one that specifically talked about. Where'd it go? Self-tapping versus self-drilling. Let's just do a new search so we can get to it. We might get to it there, but self-drilling screws versus self-tapping comparison. All right. Although self-tapping and self-drilling screws may appear similar, they are actually quite different. Self-tapping screws are designed for use with softer metals, while self-drilling screws can be used on a wide range of materials. Additionally, customers frequently ask for one type of screw when they actually need the other. To help clear up any confusion, we have outlined the similarities and differences between these two types of screws, as well as guidance on when to use one or the other. All right, so self-drilling, and it's screwed up because it's not showing you. Self-drilling, chunka. It's easy to differentiate self-drilling screws from regular screws by looking at the tip. Self-drilling screws points curve gently and are shaped like a twist drill, while regular screw points are more blunt. In addition, self-drilling screws come in different lengths, but all have standardized drill points that are identified by the number 1 through 5. This number determines the length and thickness of the point. Lastly, self-drilling screws vary in head and drive style, with Phillips, hex, or square being the most common types. Self-drilling screws are specifically designed to fasten metal to metal quickly and easily, utilizing their capacity to handle drill speeds up to 1500 RPMs, allows them to drive through thicknesses up to 0.125 of an inch, 0.125, which is what, 125 thousandths, hundredths? I don't know. Which makes them useful for many types of projects. All right. So, self-tapping screws. Self-tapping screws. There are 3 types of self-tapping screws: thread forming, thread cutting, and thread rolling. Self-tapping screws come in different shapes and sizes with pointed, blunt, or flat tips. Thread forming screws tap and create threads in a pre-drilled hole. All right. Thread rolling screws roll or extrude threads with zero clearance between screw and material. Thread cutting screws create new threads that replace the original material. Thread cutting screws are commonly used as fasteners, particularly for products or materials that require periodic maintenance, in comparison to thread forming screws, which also gather material as they are turned. But with more force, thread cutting screws typically result in less wear and tear on the target material. So I don't like things that don't have pictures. They have pictures, but none of them say. See, this I'm pretty sure is the self-drilling, not the self-tapping. All right, here's another one. Let's see. This is by James Smith on January 28th, 2023. Does he give? All right. So this looks like, yes, this is a self-tapping screw. This little devil is a self-drilling screw. And forever I have been calling these the self-tappers, just because you didn't, you know, you didn't have to have a pilot hole, because they just drilled, and that was my mistake. They drilled their own hole as you were putting them in there, and they cut their own thread. In my book they do, but apparently these are self-tappers, but you have to have a pilot hole because they don't have a drill bit built into the end of them. There are several differences between self-drilling and self-tapping screws. The difference results from the uses and the features of the screws. For self-tapping screw, it is used in sheet metal. They are made in a way that you don't need to have the hole in the sheet metal to fix the screw. This way you'll find it easy to have the screw used correctly. If you have self-drilling screws, you can use it in wood. See, I don't find that to be true. This is because it is made in a way that you can use it to drill the hole. The main difference is that this screw can be used to make the hole for itself. With this screw, you save a lot of time. You do not need to measure the wood. What you need to do is get the screw and drill the hole that you need. The size of the hole depends on the size of the screw that you use. Thus, it is easy to use the screw. Self-drilling screws make the right size of hole that they need. The feature of the self-drilling and self-tapping screws are also very different. Now, he's starting to sound like they're all the same. With self-tapping, self-drilling screws make the right size holes they need. Okay. Self-tapping, the end is very sharp. This enables it to get in the hole that is made easily. The end of the self-drilling screw is bold, to make a lot of space and able to use to drill the hole. Therefore, there's another difference that exists between self-drilling and self-tapping. This guy's almost confusing in the way he's wording this. There are several uses for self-drilling and self-tapping screws. For self-tapping screws, a sharp end that allows it to fit into metal. Another name for this kind of screw is sheet metal screw. No, I don't like this guy. Self-tapping screws, self-drilling screws, sheet metal screw. See, now this one, even though it says it's a sheet metal screw, doesn't have its own self-drilling hole. Now, when I was at Lowe's the one day, it said self-piercing. Too many screws, man. Tech screws. There are many types of screws, one of them being tech screws. Each type has its use depending on the making. Now, see, this one doesn't have any slots cut in it, so it's strictly, used with the driver bit or something. You can get tech screws for construction. If you have heavy wood, it is important that you get these screws. They are very strong when used fixing heavy metals or wood. I still don't like them using in wood because it drills a hole. All right, so follow me on this. If you put this into wood, this is so, it to me it's so wide that you just get just a little bit of the thread through there. So I just don't think they hold good in wood. Not as good as something. This to me looks really like a wood screw. And this is what we fell into the other day, I think, where we were trying to put a door closer back on a door. Oh, you twit head. And it didn't go through the metal because I think the metal was too thick. And the metal was too thick here, and we couldn't get it to really create its own thread. So that's kind of led to the discussion this evening. Let me get rid of these pictures. I keep clicking on these pictures. Self-drilling, self-tapping. What happened to that thing we were reading from? Oh. So this is where flathead refers to screws. Get rid of that. Where were we? Okay, here we go. So this is where we were at, where they started talking about self-tapping screws. And we got off on that tangent. These screws have multiple uses, like you can use whenever you are connecting any material to a metal base. It could be plastic, fiberglass, or wood as far as you're connecting them with the metal base. Basically, they can provide an excellent level of security and strength to drive them into the metal. Moreover, they come with more pitches than others using a number of threads per inch. Metal screws are preferred where self-tapping is necessary. It makes its own mating threads, resulting in more holding power. The advantage is if you can use this in wood materials when you cannot use wood screws for securing metal. So I think me and William there were trying to use a wood screw in metal, but it fit, and right now it's holding. Conclusion, as you can see above, we gave a short description of metal screws, blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. There's Jose Henry. Jose Henry. Top of pliers. Man, there's all kinds of types of something everybody gets into. Wood screws. I mean, that screw we were trying to work with looked about like this. It really did. Wood screws can come in coarse thread or fine thread. Coarse threads are better for softwood and plywood, while fine threads are better suited to hardwood. The general rule of thumb is that the coarser the thread is that coarser threads with softer materials, since they're more likely to chip or crack. Well, drive types, wood screw head, other heads, wood screw with sheet metal screw. So here's another example. I mean, you can't see the whole thing. I'm trying to show it to you. This thing won't let me show it to you. There we go. So this is a wood screw. This is a self-drilling screw. Sheet metal screws tend to be shorter than wood screws, although some tiny wood screws are available on the market. While wood screws generally have flat, beveled heads that allow for a flush surface finish, sheet metal screws have dome heads that protrude above the surface. The reasoning here is practical. In woodworking, you generally want a neat, clean aesthetic, hence the countersunk screws. Sheet metal is typically much thinner than wood, so there isn't much space to countersink screws, hence the protruding dome head. There's an advertisement. Can you use sheet metal screws for wood? Yes, you can use sheet metal screws for wood. In some cases, they may not be long enough for the task at hand, but they would generally do the job in a pinch. When you're working with softwood, take care when opting for sheet metal screws, though. The best sheet metal screws, fine thread, may cause soft, brittle wood to crack. The one in the rightmost looks like an elevator screw. Talking about this picture here, the one on the right. What do you consider an elevator screw? Let's see what he says when he says, what's an elevator screw? Elevator screw. Okay. So you're talking about just the top of head that's on it. Here. So let's look at this one. So domed versus round, very, very similar. Panhead versus flat or countersunk. Oval and then truss. So, I mean, they don't have a good picture of, all right, here we go. Get back over here. So I think you're calling this one here, is that what you're calling an elevator screw that's flat here? As opposed to like this, yeah, used elevator screws, yes. Well, that one's really pretty flat. I've never, these are the ones we use a lot of these in doing the screen doors and stuff like that, I think. Scroll down and see. So this screw here, hex washer head self-tapping screw, it's what they use a lot in the camper. So it goes through the aluminum siding into the wood, and you know it's a 1/4 inch head on these things. So I think these are ones we use in putting up the screen doors. We use these putting up the screen doors, and I think the weather stripping. We don't use a lot of the hex head screws that are self-drilling. We use a lot of these critters here, I guess, because that's really flat. You put the bit in there and screw those down. Now we use some that have a tiny round head. They're like this, only with the self-drilling head on it, and they have a square in it. That's what we use. I don't know if they're specialty screws or whatever, but that's what you use for the weather stripping. So this is the wafer head screw. Alibaba's selling them the wafer head screw there. Now one of the things I didn't look at was a concrete screw. and the difference in those. Now these is what since it's got that polyurethane or rubber grommet on it, if you go to Lowe's, this is what they call a roofing screw. They use it in sheet metal roofs because that provides a, water barrier. The self-drilling, and there's a self-tapping. This one's a self-tapping, and then a concrete. I'm finding out that, screws may look a lot alike, but they definitely don't hold in certain things. I do know that basically if you use a concrete screw once, you put it in, you take it out, you're done. It makes a good buy at one time. If you have to take it out, you can't just, because concrete, of course, doesn't retain the threads. Yeah, one and done. Yeah. Put them in. If you don't get it right the first time, you are done. Now, I've used some of these. I'd love to know what they say. Drills its own hole without spinning. Self-tapping. I think this is what Lowe's would call self-piercing. But I just don't think that can be. Let's see if there's a 1 in here. Is this the guys here? Acme Tools. Okay, so look at these screws here. To me, that, I don't want $10 off unless you're going to give me, something free. See that slot cut into them? I mean, they call this Krieg. See, is that Krieg pocket screws. Well, see, to me, these are almost self-drilling, self-tapping, I guess, in a way. But it doesn't look anything like what they were talking about self-drilling screws to be any other time. Like in this picture, see, the self-drilling is a flat like that. It's not cut into the threads. There's a separate tip on the end. Okay, here you go. This is cool. Fine thread with pan head, fine thread with washer head, coarse thread with washer head. And see, all these have that slot cut in them. Now, I don't know. For drawers, but I mean, I don't know what that's. Let's see. Go back to that. Threads per inch, length, width. Okay. So there's what I consider masonry screws, just because that's what I see. There's drywall. I tell you, I think the most versatile screw is the drywall screw. I really do. If you've got different sizes and length of a drywall screw, you can build just about anything. The only problem that you got with them, not the only problem, but one big problem is they're not designed for outside work. But, they work in a variety of circumstances, but you can't use them outside because they're not really designed for, I guess, weather, even though I'm sure they would last. But yeah, a drywall screw, sometimes you'll find those holding a light switch or a socket into a plastic box, or even sometimes a metal box. Because if you need one that's way back in the wall, like some Yahoo, put it back there and then put 2 layers of sheetrock on top of it, You never reach it with the regular screw, but you get you a long drywall screw and you can make the thing work. That's just not going to focus there, is it? I was hoping it would come into focus. It's got a bunch of different ones. All right, so here's a pocket hole screw. Let's see if we open this in a new tab. We can zoom in on this. No, we can't. It's getting bigger and bigger. All right. See these here that I've kind of highlighted. It's hard to tell. They call it a pocket hole screw. It's got the slot cut in it. It's got that funky head on it. That's an interesting thing. Huh. So there's your decking screw. Notice this is a fancy decking screw. It's got this extra little twist at the top. It's not really threads, it's kind of a twist in. The drywall screw. They call this thing a machine screw and then a wood screw. That is definitely not a masonry screw. How do you think that thing got in there? That says masonry screw. That's not right. Bulge head, coarse single thread, that's a drywall. Twin thread, and then flooring. So looking at this picture right here, what's the difference in coarse single thread? What does that mean? Twin thread, fine. I mean, does that not look like the same screw? I mean, is there such a subtle difference in those two screws that I'm just not seeing it? I don't see why they call that one in the middle there a twin thread fine and the upper one a coarse single thread. Low shear strength, not good for structural stuff. Well, it'd work good for building a chicken coop. You wouldn't want to build a house out of it. But for holding projects together and making repairs and being just an all-around, if I had a box of screws, just, you know, drywall screws would do lots and lots of things. Wood screws just right. That's your Goldilocks choice right there. Too small, drywall, no good. Wood screws just right. Interesting, they call that a masonry screw. Wood screws, screw. I think whoever invented the flathead, somewhere along the line, somewhere in one of my shows, talked about the flathead. The flathead screw. Maybe if I grew up using them and building things with flathead screws, I'd have a better appreciation for them. But I don't know. They're such a pain in the butt. But like with everything, you know, one of the things I've read about, if you have the right drill bit size and the right drill bit angle to match the flathead screw that you're working with, you can really torque them down or really get them out of a spot. But man, for the stuff that we do, It's just terrible to see a flathead screw. Now, Phillips can be good or it can be bad, but you got a better chance of getting one in or out than you do a flathead screw. I just have a hard time with flathead screw. Make anybody sick yet? Masonry, sheet metal, and cap screw, metal screw. Metal versus screw, wood. So, wood screw, metal screw. I won't say it. I can't say it. I don't know. I can't really look at one and say whether it's wood or metal. Yeah, William says screw it. That's right. Just throw anything in there you can get going in there. That's what we end up doing. Probably going to bite us in the butt. We'll probably end up redoing that one particular door, but it's what we had. It's what we used. And I would hate to think, and you probably should, you know, try to get the proper screw for the proper job. Like if you're putting down, subflooring and you're going to use screws, because I hate swinging a hammer. I can, squeeze the trigger on an Ugga-Dugga or an electric drill, battery operated drill, and screw down, some subfloor. I just do that, But it would be good because they say there's, screws that are better for the MDF boards and the particle board and the glued to boards and the plywood boards and all that kind of stuff. But if you go to Lowe's, you're basically looking at sheetrock screws, concrete screws, decking screws, or the little packs of whatever, 8s, 10s, 12s, all those kind of things that you're going to use in small projects. So I don't see anything else. Ooh. How to remove a small broken screw. Oh, it's not nice. All right. Well, a very basic look at screws. Did we learn anything? I learned I've been calling self-tapping screws the wrong thing all this time. They are really self-drilling screws, and therefore I'll probably just continue to say it wrong and just call them self-tappers. Get the self-tappers. Let's just use the self-tappers. Why? Because, that's what I've been calling them forever, seems like. Not forever, but it just makes sense in my mind to call them that instead of what are they really called? The self-drillers, the self-drilling screws. Because I guess, you're putting them in metal. That's the reason. They tap, they drill a hole. Maybe I can learn. I don't know. I'll try to learn. I'll try to do better. I promise I'll try to do better. All right, everybody. Three people moving up in the world. William, are you glad I didn't do the dragon book? I started to bring home that dragons are real book, but I didn't. I think it's more of a joke book. Well, not joke. They don't tell jokes. But I think it's more of a satire book that says dragons were real. I mean, I'd hate to think that it was a true book saying that dragons were real. I don't know. Maybe one day we'll find a dragon skeleton. Who knows? I did hear a guy talking on Joe Rogan, the Joe Rogan Experience, that said they found a new dinosaur and it gave some big old name, but it was like a flying giraffe. It was like this huge thing that was kind of as big as a giraffe, which is weird. I don't know. There couldn't have been a lot of them because they're not finding a lot of the skeletons, I don't think. Not yet, anyway. So, anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for showing up. And if you watch it after it's live, that's fine. Leave me a thumbs up, down, sideways, whatever. Comment, like, subscribe, do all those kind of things. I'm still trying to figure out. I was looking at, before I started the shows, probably while I was late, looking at the different shows that I've done and trying to figure out why do some get 30 or 40 views and some of them get 12 or less. I just don't understand, because, you know, people watch them and they don't leave me a comment and tell me what I'm doing right or wrong. But anyway, all right, everybody, I appreciate it. Until next Thursday. Oh, I'm getting a new phone, so hopefully it'll be good enough to where I can make videos and upload them and do things from one phone instead of trying to use the Apple phone, which right now is chock full of stuff that it's not my phone. So I can't just go in there and whoop, wipe them all off there and start new. So I've got a video on there that I've edited, and I take it from the editor and you save it, the edited version. And then once you save the edited version, it allows you to upload it. Well, there's not enough room on the phone to save the edited version. And I've deleted some of the old videos. I've deleted basically everything I'm kind of comfortable with deleting. So I don't know what I want to do. But anyway, thanks for showing up. Come back anytime, Thursdays. Or you can come back and watch anytime. You don't have to come live, even though that would be nice. You don't have to show up live. But anyway, I got to